state of war, in a state of economic depression, in the state of depletion of the resources of our planet because of the greed of psychopaths who thought they could create their own reality. Well, look at the reality they created.
You're listening to The Truth Perspective on the Soft Radio Network. The world for people who think.
Hello, today is Sunday, February 4th, 2018, and welcome to The Truth Perspective, everyone. I'm your host, Ilan Martin, and with me in the studio today is Harrison Keeley.
Hello, everyone.
Joining us on the show, we're fortunate to have with us today Bulgarian investigative journalist and Middle East correspondent, Dilyana Gaytandzhieva. Welcome to the show, Dilyana.
Hello, and thank you for having me and taking interest in my investigations.
Well, we appreciate you spending the time with us today to discuss those investigations. They're super interesting. But before we discuss those, could you please share with us and our listeners a little bit about your background and what it is that you've been used to doing as a journalist for the past several years?
Yes, sure. I'm a Bulgarian journalist, currently based in Sofia. This is the Bulgarian capital. I've been a journalist for 15 years, and the last 5 years of which I've been covering war zones, and especially the Middle East. The last years I covered the war in Syria in particular, and my last investigations were on the Bulgarian weapon supplies to terrorists in Syria. Not only Bulgarian weapons, it turned out that many countries supplied weapons to the so-called moderate rebels in Syria. My country was one of them, but the organizer of this scheme, massive and international criminal scheme, was not my country. It was, if you want me to start with this investigation, I can continue. Sure. The main organizer of this criminal scheme was the Pentagon and the CIA, and I have documents proving this involvement, and also Saudi Arabia. Let's not forget the involvement of Saudi Arabia. Actually, Balkan states such as Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania, Croatia, the Czech Republic, they sold weapons to the U.S. Special Operations Command under covert program of the Pentagon and the CIA, and these weapons were transported to different war zones on diplomatic flights, provided by the Azeri state-run company, Silkway Airlines. So you can see the whole pattern, how many countries have been involved in this international weapons shipment to terrorists in Syria. Unfortunately, so far we have nobody held to account because the result is appalling. More than 500,000 people in Syria have already been killed by the very same weapons. Everybody talks about how disgusting this war is. Everybody says we are against terrorism, but actually they have been secretly facilitating this terrorism, because if the terrorists had not had these weapons, they would not have established their caliphate and murdered so many people in Syria, Yemen, and other places. This is the scary thing, and I have documents on 350 diplomatic flights with weapons to Syria and Yemen and Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Congo, and other war zones around the world. And all these flights were performed in the last 3 years. Actually, we're talking about weapon supplies since 2015. This is what I have documented.
Dilyana, maybe you can tell our listeners how you first got on or found out about these connections, because you were actually a correspondent on the ground in Syria. Is that correct?
Yes. I come from a very small country, and here we have no secret. So we, having said we, I mean the journalists in Bulgaria, we knew that Bulgaria had been supplying weapons to Syria, but the proof came in December 2016 when I was reporting on the Battle of Aleppo. When the jihadists from al-Nusra Front, this is the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, retreated from their positions in eastern Aleppo, I got inside 9 underground warehouses full of heavy weapons with Bulgaria as their country of origin. I was accompanied with the local cameraman and producer. I had my local sources. I'm stressing this because all the time I got the one and the same question. Who helped you? Got inside? Where did you get information from? I can assure you, all the journalists who were covering this war there, all of them were able to go inside if they wished and to film these weapons, not only Bulgarian weapons. If they wanted to carry out an investigation, they could have carried out such investigation, and they could have helped stop these weapon supplies a long ago. They just didn't want to do that. So I'm not the only journalist. I mean, I was there and I did what I had to do and what I had to show to the people. That's the truth. I don't know why other journalists didn't do the same. I have no explanation. I mean, I have such explanation, but I don't want to talk about other journalists. It's up to their conscience.
Right. Well, Dilyana, at some point in the midst of you're doing your correspondence work in Syria, some documents were leaked to you. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that helped your investigation?
When I filmed the Bulgarian weapons, the weapons, they had serial numbers, they had labels with the manufacturer and the company, the Bulgarian company which exported these weapons. So I traced back these shipments when I got back to my home country, and I started publishing a series of reports on these weapons shipments. But few months after my first report from Aleppo, I got a message on Twitter by an anonymous Twitter account, and I was leaked secret documents which were diplomatic notes between a number of embassies, not only in Bulgaria but also in other countries, mainly Balkan countries. This was a correspondence between them and the Azerbaijani Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Bulgarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and many other embassies. So in these leaked documents, I found out the documentation which proved the diplomatic scheme, actually how all these countries supplied weapons on diplomatic flights and under diplomatic cover to the U.S. Special Operations Command, which transported these weapons to Syria under such diplomatic cover. Diplomatic flights are exempt of checks, inspections, and air bills. Even now, we can't exactly say if the type and the quantity of the weapons which which was shipped to Syria. We can't say if this was exactly the same quantity because no checks, no inspections have ever been made.
Mm-hmm.
And,
So
yeah.
mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Well, that's a. Oh, go ahead.
I published a link to these documents online because I wanted more people to see the documents and to trust me, to believe me, because in the beginning my reports were met with silence in my country and with total rejection. I was accused of betraying the interests of my country and terrible allegations. I was accused of wrongdoing because I didn't keep silent about what I saw in Syria. But it is even not needed to explain why I published these revelations. Every human being must do the same because I do believe that if we all fight against such criminal schemes, we can somehow stop them. When we shed light on weapon supplies to terrorists, sooner or later, these supplies will stop. And to be honest, I'm happy that a few months after I started publishing my reports, other journalists also got involved. They also published the Silkway documents and started investigating the weapon supplies to terrorists from their countries. And finally, the US government announced the termination of the program. Actually, this was the first time when Donald Trump confirmed the existence of such CIA program officially, and I'm happy that this in the end stopped. No matter that now the United States still use Bulgarian weapons to other places. This is another issue. At least my reports helped people in my country to see the truth. Because Bulgaria is not a war-like country, and no matter what our government has been doing, we're against our involvement in this war, especially when we send weapons to terrorists, not to the so-called moderate rebels. These were not moderate rebels. These were Al-Qaeda terrorists, because you can't call an opposition moderate when it is heavily armed and when it kills civilians.
Mm-hmm. Well, that reminds me, just in the last week, what was the exact story? There was something that was going on in Syria. I think it might have been the downing of the Russian jet just a couple days ago, just yesterday, and one of the, it might have been the BBC, but it was a big Western media organization had put out a headline saying that rebel group claims responsibility for downing the jet, and then in the article it named the rebel group as I think they're going by right, and it even says in there a known affiliate of the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, and so right in the headline they call them a rebel group, and then in the actual article they mention that they're Al-Qaeda, which is just it really goes to show how biased and just how little regard for truth or presenting the actual story that the Western media actually have. That they'll continue on with this narrative about rebels in Syria, and if this was even if this was in Iraq, where the Americans had the upper hand militarily, they would have called them terrorists. But because it's Syria and because it's Bashar al-Assad and Russia and Hezbollah, on the side against the terrorists, then all the terrorists, they're just called rebel groups.
No, that's absolutely true. And I have seen on the ground in Syria how some journalists had to report on, for example, bomb explosions, and how others even didn't bother to go and film the victims of such atrocities, simply because they knew very well that the perpetrators were Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State. They just ignored such tragedies, and any other examples can be given, but the point is that finally the world starts to realize the truth. The truth is appalling. We all supplied, all the countries from Europe and the United States, Saudi Arabia, supplied weapons to the terrorists in Syria on the pretext that these are honest revolutionaries fighting against Bashar al-Assad. And I got the same question. Are you supporting Bashar al-Assad? No, I don't support any regime. I'm against any regime, and I have been reporting on Syria for 5 years, so I have seen a lot, and I don't support any regime. But I can't accept that because you're against the government of one country, you should facilitate terrorists so that they can follow your own agenda. I'm talking about the United States and Saudi Arabia. You can find nationals among the terrorists from 86 countries. How come all these nationals from 86 countries, how come they crossed the border and entered Syria? Obviously, they were facilitated not only to penetrate Syria, but also to be heavily armed and launch attacks on civilians in Syria so that they can topple the Assad regime. That's the sad truth. Unfortunately, 5 years later, we have more than half a million people dead, and nobody will be held to account. I tried to check what the legal basis is for that, but it turned out that, for example, the United States is not a state party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, meaning that the United States cannot be held, or not the United States, the US government. I differentiate between the American people and the government, and they can't be held to account for war crimes simply because they didn't join this international treaty. No legal ways to hold somebody to account.
So, Dilyana, you have a very specific and firsthand kind of, but also a kind of a, what's the term? It's a kind of a bird's eye view of the situation in Syria. I mean, you were not only looking at it from the eyes of a journalist, but you were on the ground there. I've heard interviews with you where you've seen things that have, on the ground, you've seen the direct impact and destruction of the weapons that were a part of this scheme that you describe in your articles. And so it's become a very kind of real thing to you, something that my impression is has hit you on a visceral level. That made the whole situation very difficult to ignore as not only a journalist, but just as a human being.
Exactly. Maybe I'm too much influenced of what I saw in Syria. Yes, I must confirm that. I try to be not prejudiced and to set aside all these emotions, but there are was a story which struck me and which haunts me still. I can't forget this. It was a rocket attack. I was in Aleppo, and because when we're talking about deaths, they're just numbers, they're statistics. But when you see yourself, even one death, in my case, the death of a child, you just can't stop thinking about it. It really matters. It has a name. It is not anonymous. So I was inside the hotel in Aleppo with many Western journalists, by the way, and a rocket fell next to us, and we heard a huge blast. So the rest of the journalists didn't go because they knew that this rocket came from eastern Aleppo, where the so-called moderate rebels were located. So the Western journalists were not supposed to cover this tragedy, because they should say to their viewers, look what the moderate rebels are doing. They're hitting civilians in Western Aleppo. The terrorists, not the Syrian government or the Russian forces on the ground in Aleppo. And I went to see the aftermath of this strike, and the rockets had fallen upon a car with a mother and a child. In the car, they were beheaded. The child was beheaded, and I can't forget this scene. And I can't stop thinking that this was the very same rocket that I filmed in eastern Aleppo. I mean, the same time Bulgarian rocket. And I tried to explain to people in Bulgaria, look what our government is doing. Look what happened in Aleppo. The Bulgarian rockets killed a child and beheaded a small child, five-year-old child with his mother. They were heading to the market to buy food, and all of a sudden this rocket fell over them and they were beheaded. And when you see the deaths yourself, it really matters. And it was not only this child, a lot of children there beheaded the same way. For what? Just because governments from the other parts of the world want to topple another government the other parts of the world. I can't understand the sense of this war. Every crisis must have political solution, but not war solution. The war is not a solution. It can't change anything. That is why I can't set aside my emotions. I'm sorry that I'm so emotional now, but people can't really understand the truth because they don't have the truth. All that is being presented to them is propaganda. We have this saying here in my country, the first victim of every war, this is the truth. And this is what happened to Syria. The first victim of the war in Syria was the truth. From the very first day, people were lied by the media that this is a revolution. This wasn't revolution. What happened? Yes, in the beginning, some of the protests were against the regime, and people did want a change. But very soon their protest was hijacked by foreign powers, and they turned this peaceful protest, to a bloodshed.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Dilyana, you've mentioned interacting with Bulgarians about this, and you also several minutes ago you said that one of the responses that you've gotten has been to try to basically shame you for bringing these documents and these realities to light. Have you gotten any positive feedback from Bulgarians, like even just ordinary people who have responded to what you've been saying?
Yes, on social media, luckily, I had huge support from my fellow countrymen and women, but I didn't have any support from my colleagues in other media organizations in Bulgaria. Some of them told me in private conversations that they don't want to lose their job, like as it happened to me. But this is the price. Sometimes we have to choose between our well-being and our conscience and our duty to the people. Because for me, it was such a shame, and I felt terrible in Syria when people asked me where I came from, and when I answered, the first question I got was, why are you sending weapons to terrorists to kill our children? And I didn't know what to answer. That's the truth. People think of Bulgaria and other Balkan states as the main supplies to terrorists, but this is not true. Yes, Bulgarian weapons made it to terrorists in Syria, but they were transported on diplomatic flights by the Pentagon and the CIA. It sounds like a science fiction maybe to people, but I can provide the documents proving that allegation. All this was well prepared, and as a result, finally, we have one of the deadliest war in the last decade, the war in Syria.
Well, just getting back to the response from the people of Bulgaria, at some point you had put out a few of these articles in Trude newspaper, and I guess the Bulgarian intelligence agencies had called you in to discuss your research with you. Could you tell us a little bit about what happened there and why they called you in?
In the beginning, the Bulgarian prosecutors launched an investigation into the Bulgarian weapon supplies to terrorists in Aleppo, but nobody even asked me to provide this footage, and I was the only witness, and nobody even questioned me, and they didn't want me to speak up about my findings in Aleppo. A few weeks later, they came to the conclusion that there was no wrongdoing by the manufacturer of these weapons and the company which exported the weapons, so all was fine. They said Bulgaria has not sent weapons to Syria, to terrorists in Syria, which was obvious. I don't expect that the Bulgarian government or the Bulgarian prime minister to have a contract with Giuliani or Baghdadi, the leaders of Al-Qaeda, of Al-Nusra and the Islamic State. Of course not. The scheme was under diplomatic cover, and I provided evidence and documents. And the Bulgarian, I want to explain the legislation in Bulgaria. Every weapons export from Bulgaria must be approved by a special commission, which includes members of the Bulgarian government and the director of the Bulgarian National Security Agency. So all these weapons exports have been approved by Bulgarian officials, by the Bulgarian government and by the director of the Bulgarian National Security Agency. They were all well aware that these Bulgarian weapons were destined to war zones, and they tried to justify themselves by the fact that the consignee was U.S. Special Operations Command or Saudi Arabia, but neither the U.S. Army nor the Saudi Army use Bulgarian weapons because they're Soviet-style weapons. They are non-US standard weapons, and they are not compatible with the military standard of the US Army and the Saudi Army. Furthermore, I provided footage and evidence from the ground in Aleppo that Bulgarian weapons ended up in the hands of terrorists. They ignored that fact, and instead of investigating the crimes, namely weapons shipments to terrorists, they investigated me, my sources, and I was interrogated by the Bulgarian National Security Agency. They wanted me to disclose my sources. I'm not obliged to do it, neither because the Bulgarian legislation protects me as a journalist, nor because my understanding of how a journalist must protect its sources allows me to do that. So I didn't disclose my sources, and a few hours later, I got a phone call from the secretary of the newspaper where I used to work, and she asked me to go and to sign the papers for my resignation, for my firing, actually. They didn't want me to go back to Syria to continue the investigation because I was about to travel again to Syria in order to finish this investigation. I had a huge documentation detailing the types of the weapons, and I wanted to see how many of these items ended up in Syria, but I wasn't able to do it. That's why I was fired to stop investigating.
Have you been working? Have you been working independently since then, or did you find have you been working with another paper?
I am a freelance journalist. I prefer to work that way because I never I can't imagine to go through this again. It was a huge humiliation for me. I was in a position to try to justify my reports for what I risked my life in Aleppo. I'm not complaining, don't get me wrong. I mean, I had to justify why I risked my life in Aleppo instead of covering briefings here in Sofia. And it was very shameful. I'm not in the position to justify my decision in life. So I prefer to do what I want, and any media organization which is willing to feature such stories is welcome, and I am glad to work with anybody who wants to shed light on such issues, mainly weapons supplies. Now I am investigating the Pentagon weapons programs. It is not only the Syrian program. There are many Pentagon weapons programs, scary programs.
Well, did we want to get into that, or is there more you wanted to cover on Syria?
Well, is there anything else crucial to your story about the Syrian arms smuggling that we left out at this time, Dilyana? Anything that we should include here to round out the picture?
There is a follow-up story, and it is actually there is a reaction, and it came not from the Bulgarian government or the Pentagon or Saudi Arabia or other parties involved in this international weapons shipment network. It came from the Council of Europe. They are going to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe are going to vote on a resolution to investigate the weapons supplies to terrorists in Syria. And they also want to implement a special legislation so that whistleblowers and journalists can work more freely instead of being fired, which is very positive news. I'm very happy that 6 months later, such international organization is willing to at least to investigate. I'm far from the illusion that justice will ever be served, maybe because I come from a place where we are so used to injustice that we can't even believe that finally, in the end, justice will be served. But it's good that somebody in the end raises this problem. I hope that at least special legislation will be passed on and we can work freely and independently in the end without persecution.
Well, that's a very nice thing to hear, actually, and maybe less a question than a comment about this whole story that you broke, Dilyana. The plausible deniability idea here is so strong. I mean, technically speaking, when the CIA and the Pentagon organized these transports and connected with these governments in Bulgaria and Azerbaijan and other places, they must have been told this isn't illegal. What we're doing is perfectly legal. We have under diplomatic cover. We can't be questioned or found out because of that privilege, and it's so sneaky, and yet somehow the CIA had managed to convince the governments of the countries involved to participate. And it's interesting also, Bulgaria doesn't. Go ahead.
It is not hard to convince the Bulgarian government, I can assure you, because I've been working as a journalist for 15 years in my country, and all I've seen here is serving foreign interests, not the interest of the Bulgarian people. It is not hard at all. What I've seen in the documents, there are many companies which acted as middlemen, intermediary, and they hit all the traces so that the scheme would be on papers legal, but it wasn't legal because in the end user certificate the end user was not specified. The U.S. Special Operations Command sent letters to the Bulgarian government and to this special commission which authorizes the weapons exports. And in these letters, the U.S. Special Operations Command has written these weapons are for the needs of the U.S. government and our international allies abroad. But who are these international allies? And furthermore, this is a fake end user certificate. End user certificate means that you must put and specify the end user who is going to use these weapons. It wasn't indicated in the document, so now we are talking about absolutely illegal weapons export under Bulgarian legislation, and Bulgaria is a state party to the UN Convention and many other international treaties. And under all these international treaties and legislation, Bulgaria is not allowed to export weapons to third parties in this case, because unknown third parties on documents, the end user was not specified. So, however we look at these documents, they are fake. This is not an official document in the way that it should be presented to the government of another country. And Bulgarian government and Bulgarian officials who signed such fake end user certificates are to be put in jail. That's the truth. This is absolutely illegal, and it is violation of the Bulgarian and international law. I'm not talking about the United States officials. I checked, and it turned out that the United States has not joined this international convention, which is not surprising because they know very well, I mean the Pentagon, the CIA, they know very well that what they have been doing is would be illegal if the U.S. joined this UN convention. Mm-hmm. That's why the United States has not signed it. But Bulgaria did sign such a convention, and not only Bulgaria, Serbia and other Balkan states. So we are talking about intentional violation of international law. And all those officials must be tried and must be put in jail.
But unfortunately, like you mentioned, there will be this investigation about the Bulgarian arms shipments. But like you said, Bulgaria and all these other Balkan and Eastern European countries are basically acting as middlemen. So the image that came to my mind was kind of like the drug dealing in the way it is in the United States and Canada, for instance, where you have like the head of the organization, the big boss of the drug trafficking organization, but then the only people that usually get caught are the the small guys on the street that are pushing the drugs, for their bosses. And the bosses never get caught. It's always the guys on the street. Well, I wouldn't say never, but most often it's the kids on the street that are pushing the drugs for their boss. But the people actually organizing the getting the drugs into the country and then giving the drugs to their low-level employees that sell them on the streets, the big guys never get caught. So in this case, we've got Bulgaria being investigated potentially. Yeah. But we'll never hear anything about how it was the United States government and military and intelligence agencies that were the ones pulling the strings and basically working the system and manipulating Bulgaria, among other countries, to do their dirty work for them. Because, like you said, the U.S. isn't a party to like the International Criminal Court, so they just get other countries who happen to be parties to do the dirty work for them, and then they can get away with it. And like we won't see Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or, anyone that was in government at that time or in the military or intelligence. None of them will be held to account. And it's just a shame, really.
What made me very angry in terms of the Bulgarian involvement in the war in Syria was that many international media organizations ignored the Silkway documents. I mean, the documents proving that the Pentagon, the CIA, used diplomatic cover and diplomatic flights to transport weapons to war zones. I provided the full documentation to many Western journalists and to many even journalists in Germany, because people don't know, but the German government was also involved in weapon supplies to Syria, and these documents prove that fact. Anyway, these foreign journalists just ignored the documents and preferred to report on the involvement of one small country like Bulgaria or Serbia or Romania, from a country from Eastern Europe, presenting them as the main supplier of terrorists in Syria. They just ignored the involvement of their own governments. And my idea was, I tried to, what I wanted to do is, if many journalists join together and if we all can hold to account our governments, the German government, the Bulgarian government, the US government, and so on. And I wanted to do something like an organization of journalists who can fight together, because it wasn't easy, and I don't want to lie to you. I had my bad times. I had terrible moments when I didn't want to go out. I feared for my family's safety. Yes, it was hard for me. I don't want to lie to you. But I thought that if many journalists join together, we could make a difference. Unfortunately, Western journalists didn't want to publish the Silkway documents. I don't know why. I got an answer from a journalist from Germany. In the beginning, he was very impressed. He was willing to make a scandal in Germany and to reveal the truth. So I sent him all the documents, and especially the documents. I separated and attached to another email the documents for Germany. So he asked the German Ministry of Defense about the involvement of his country in the weapon supplies, and he got an answer that the Defense Ministry of Germany never chartered Silkway Airlines, which was a blatant lie, because he had the documents how the Ministry of Defense of Germany chartered many times Silkway Airlines for such weapons supplies. But he just, I don't know, he didn't publish anything. And now people think that we have countries which fight terrorism and we have countries which supply terrorism. And guess who are the countries who supply terrorism? Small countries from Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria, Romania, but the main players, you will not see them in the mainstream media, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the list of major countries in the world that were part of this program is just mind-boggling in one sense. In another sense, you know, you hear about Germany lying about their connection to Silkways, and you remember how deeply the CIA has its hooks into German media, and how the NSA has been so closely monitoring the German government. I mean, there have been so many stories of how much of a hold the U.S. intelligence apparatus has on the functioning of Germany. It isn't such a surprise in one sense. But on that note, Dilyana, I'm wondering if we can get into your recent work in your research on the Pentagon's bioweapon research around the world, because when we saw this article posted to Southfront a few weeks ago, the first thing I thought when I saw it was, wow.
Science fiction, this is not possible.
well, that, and I was very happy for you that you had taken the ball and ran with it in a way. You know, you had broke that other story, and here you were. I mean, this is we republished it as soon as we could. This is a really extensive, comprehensive article on the Pentagon's bioweapon research around the world, and whatever you think they've been doing, it's far more extensive, and there's far more money involved than I had imagined. So I guess the first question I'd want to ask you is, how did you what made you interested in covering this topic as extensively as you have with your new article?
I came across this program, which is not called and not titled, don't be mistaken, biological weapons program. No, I came across this program while investigating all the Pentagon weapons programs. And because I'm from a generation which doesn't, I don't have much memory of that time. Actually, I wasn't born when the United States and the other countries joined the UN Convention on the Prohibition of Biological Weapons in 1975. So for me, in the beginning, when I saw these documents, it was really shocking. We're used to think about biological weapons as something which terrorists may obtain, may develop, and may use against civilians. This is what we are used to think of the biological weapons. Or we see biological weapons only on in TV movies or Hollywood movies. But when you see documents, real documents, originating from the Pentagon about a program involving 25 countries, this is more than shocking. Mm-hmm. I got documents on a program which is called Cooperative Biological Engagement Program, and this program, which is with a budget of $2.1 billion so far, and it funds Pentagon biolaboratories in 25 countries across the world, but mainly countries which border on Russia, China, and Iran. These are countries from the former Soviet Union, such as Georgia and Ukraine, also countries in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia and Africa. And the program has a very positive name, very positive title, Cooperative Biological Engagement Program. But when you start checking in detail the projects, you see that actually this is an active biological weapons program involving the whole of the world. So what I did was to follow the projects, especially in Georgia and in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that, by the way, I want to stress something which is the most scaring for me. The United States, the U.S. Army, has a special military facility, according to the documents which I obtained, in the state of Utah. This military facility, which is called the Dugway Proving Ground, and which was used in the past by the U.S. Army while they were running the U.S. biological weapons program. So we have the same military facility as the one in the past, testing and producing bioagents. I'm talking about the present. And this military facility not only produce bioagents such as anthrax, tularemia, botulinum toxin, but in this military facility, the U.S. Army also develops different techniques for dissemination of these biological agents, and not only by aerosol, but also by explosives. Can you imagine that the U.S. Army is testing dissemination of bioagents by explosives? What for? They say the justification is defensive program, but what defensive is there in the fact that first the U.S. Army tests dissemination by explosives of bioagents, and secondly, the U.S. Army has biolaboratories around its main rivals, Russia, China, and Iran. Mm-hmm. The sad thing is that it's so scary that people even can't believe in it. I contacted journalists in Georgia and in Ukraine. They were so scared to talk about this issue. When they heard Pentagon program, they just flatly rejected any conversation, not because they didn't know it was true, simply because they were so afraid, and they didn't want to risk their safety, their well-being. These are small countries like Bulgaria. Georgia is even poorer country than Bulgaria. And journalists in Georgia just gave up on this investigation. They didn't want to join me in investigating the Pentagon biolaboratory there. what is said is that there are many outbreaks in all these countries where the Pentagon biolaboratories are operating, and people suffer, people die of deadly diseases on a daily basis, but they don't know the source of these outbreaks. And the truth is that they are used as a testing ground for viruses, bacteria, and toxins, which can be easily weaponized and used in the future if should the need arise against Russia, China, and Iran.
One of the shocking elements to your article, Dilyana, was that they were also looking into weaponizing insects, that they were testing mosquitoes and ticks and biting flies to be used as vectors or carriers of various diseases. And when I read this, I thought, gosh, if they wanted to infect a part of the population in a really underhanded and covert manner without conventional weapons, they can just unleash some of these weaponized insects that they've produced in their labs to destroy the health of people and possibly even kill them. And it's like you said earlier. I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but there have been cases that you've documented that in the vicinity of these biolabs in Georgia and Ukraine and I think Chechnya, where
Yes.
people have experienced these insects and have come down with certain diseases.
Yes, and we must all ask the question, why has the U.S. spent $840 million over the past years on synthetic biology, and the defense is the main consumer of this biological synthetic funding. What for? Why is the Pentagon interested in researching genetical modification of insects? The Pentagon has a number of very scary military projects on genetically modified insects. One of the projects which shocked me is engineering of insects so that they can transmit genetically modified viruses. On the one hand, you genetically engineer an insect. On the other hand, you genetically engineer a virus. And the aim of this project is to join them and to do a super mosquito, for example, that can target a specific population transmitting genetically modified virus. This is very scary. There are another project which seeks to create again special type of mosquito which can resist certain temperatures and which can also change its habitat. And I can give an example. Such is the case in Georgia and in neighboring Dagestan. This is a republic from the Russian Federation, and in these two places, people complain of being bitten by biting flies in their bathrooms while naked, and they can't defend themselves because these insects are everywhere. They can't be killed, they can't be sprayed and destroyed. They're everywhere. These are super insects which probably are a result of the activity of the Pentagon in this military biolab called Luga Center in the capital of Georgia, Tbilisi. Also, I was shocked by the fact that nobody questioned the need of such programs. How can the production of genetically modified viruses and insects be legal in the United States? But it is legal, and enhanced potential pandemic pathogens experiments are legal in the United States. Why? I mean, why the legislation is why in the United States there is such a legislation? For what? This is simply a way to cover up such projects in the name of scientific research. But I can't understand for what. The scientists create deadly viruses in order to research them. But what's the point of this? Why do you want to create deadly viruses? They can justify these experiments in that way. We want to be ready in the future if all of a sudden a deadly disease occurs. But all of us who are informed in the way the vaccination process happens, the scientists isolate the pathogen and then develop a vaccine. And it is not needed to develop the virus so that you can develop a vaccine afterwards. When you don't have even outbreak, you have a virus which is synthesized by you in a laboratory. I can't understand how such experiments can be legal in the United States in the first place.
Well, actually, in your article, you mentioned Jeff Sessions being a lobbyist for some of the corporations that do this research and getting, I think the number was around $250,000 at some point in the 2007, 2008. He, I think he's the U.S. Attorney General under Trump right now. And if that should give folks any indication, there's a huge amount of money that U.S. taxpayers are paying through the Pentagon to lobby our own politicians to support this kind of research. So at least part of the answer to this insanity, as you so well expressed, Dilyana, is that there's a kind of a disease here in the U.S. of greed that would help our politicians, our military, to overlook the moral and ethical implications of such research in order to enrich themselves. And it's just a major problem that we've been seeing and documenting here on SOT.net for many years now. So, yeah, greed. That's a big one, certainly.
Yeah, and the fact that the Pentagon uses private contractors, this is very indicative. I want to stress that the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, this is the agency in charge of funding this program, has outsourced much of the work under the military program to private companies, which are not held accountable to Congress and which can operate more freely and move around the rule of law. In some of the documents, I found out that U.S. civilian personnel performing work at the Georgia Biolaboratory called the Luga Center have also been given diplomatic immunity, although they are not diplomats. This means that private companies can perform work under diplomatic cover for the U.S. government without being under the direct control of the host state or the Republic of Georgia. And this practice is often used by the CIA to provide cover for its agents. It is all the same. If you follow the Pentagon programs, it is in the CIA programs, they are connected. It is always the same. The use of diplomatic cover, the use of diplomatic immunity. In the case of the weapon supplies to terrorists in Syria, it was diplomatic flights. In the case of the Pentagon biolaboratories in Ukraine and other places and other countries, you have private contractors with who have been accorded diplomatic immunity. They are not diplomats. This is the easiest way to cover up illegal activities and to provide cover for your agents. And it is always the same. Also, very important detail, all these projects are carried out under an agreement with the host state. But these agreements, I had this agreement between the Department of Defense and the Ukrainian state. All these agreements prohibit the host government or the local government of public disclosure of the information related to the program, which means that I can't ask officially the Ukrainian government to provide information, detailed information as to the type of the biological research, the projects, the results, simply because they are not allowed to provide publicly this information. It is secret. And this is another way to cover up the program under an agreement with the host state. By the way, the Pentagon has been granted access to the state secrets of the host state under this agreement, which is very scary. Actually, the host state does not have control over the military biolaboratories on its own territory. It is scary. And in the case of Ukraine, there were a lot of outbreaks of deadly diseases. The local police launched an investigation in one of the cases, infection with incurable disease. But because the military program of the Pentagon in Ukraine is secret information, we can't ask questions and we can't get answers. This information is classified. What for? If this is for the benefit and for the health of the Ukrainian people, then why not announce what you have done for these people? Why is it secret? And I don't believe that anybody who has a look at these documents can trust the Pentagon that they're so altruistic that they would spend $2.1 billion on biological research projects around the world, especially in countries bordering on Russia, China, and Ukraine, their main rivals, instead of spending this money on their own citizens. It is ridiculous. It is obvious that the Pentagon has spent so much money on a military program which aims to develop biological weapons. And this is not my allegation. These are the facts. And all these facts are probable and verifiable by documents originating from the Pentagon. The sad thing is that we can't convince people that such things can happen today. People in Ukraine, in Georgia, I had communication with them. They did confirm a lot of inexplicable outbreaks. but they can't accept the fact that their own government can use them as a testing ground for something so terrible, so scary. They just don't want to believe this.
Mm-hmm. Well, the U.S. has a long history itself of testing biological agents and other things on its own population. There was the Tunguski experiment, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, where soldiers in the U.S. southern regions were infected with, I think it was plutonium or something else. But anyway, you've done a lot of research into this particular subject. One of the things that struck me in a rather strong way was a section that you wrote, how to kill 625,000 people for just 29 cents cost per death. And
this is a Pentagon project, yes.
Yeah, and it's Do you want to speak on that a little bit, or?
This is from information from Pentagon, declassified Pentagon documents, and according to this military report, this is a military report on the U.S. Biological weapons program in the past. One of the experiments, maybe it wasn't only one, but it was a comparison between an aerosol attack with tularemia on a city and mosquito attack with insects infected with yellow fever. And this report, the aim of this report was to assess which way of attacks is more effective but cheaper. And it turned out that if the U.S. Army potentially uses aerosol attack on a city and infects the city with tularemia, it would be cheaper, and it would cost them to kill more than 600,000 people just for 29 cents per death. It is scary. So they also researched how to produce more casualties for less money. That's
right.
Experiments.
Well, that's like a...
And this shows how much our lives cost them. Our lives cost them 29 cents per death. It's cost of our life.
So this example isn't so much like a science fiction movie. It's more of a comedy horror movie. Like this is Dr. Strangelove meets like 28 Days Later, where you've got a bunch of people in a in a bunker somewhere talking about the weaponized mosquito gap and being like, oh well we can get this many mega deaths for only 29 cents on the dollar, and it's just, it would be funny if it weren't so disturbing at the same time.
Unfortunately, they are willing to spend huge amount of money, and I wonder why the taxpayers in the United States are not informed about the way their money has been spent, because to be honest, I don't follow the domestic news, U.S. domestic news that much, but I know that people complain that they don't have enough money to treat their children because the state doesn't provide enough help for healthcare and so on. So this problem with the health system in the United States exists. Can you imagine if all this money spent on biological research projects abroad, if they were spent in the United States for the American children, for their health, for other humanitarian purposes. I'm sure that the American citizens would not approve of their money being spent on producing viruses, bacteria, and toxins, because I even can't calculate over the last decade how much money has been spent on the production of viruses, bacteria, and toxins. For what? Probably this is we will have answer in the future. I hope not. But the thing is, all these biolaboratories are located in countries bordering on the main rivals of the United States. And a few days ago, the Pentagon chief announced that the main threat is the main threat to the Pentagon is China and Russia. And obviously, the biolaboratories are located exactly in the countries bordering on their main rivals. Also, another interesting fact, the US has been secretly collecting biological material from Chinese and Russians. I have no idea as to why the US Army has been collecting synovial tissue and RNA from Russians. I have absolutely no idea. I read again a military report, which was prepared by the US Army, and it is titled genetically modified pathogens. In this military report, the US Army lists 5 groups of genetically modified pathogens, among which designer diseases. These designer diseases can be used to target a specific genotype or specific ethnic group, and for the development of ethnical bioweapons. So far, nobody has ever publicly confirmed the development and research of ethnical bioweapons, but the fact that this type of weapons are present in a military report means that probably it is highly likely that the Pentagon has been researching such type of weapons. And why are they collecting biological material from especially Chinese and Russians? I have no answer.
Well, this idea of ethnic-specific biological weapons first came to our attention about 15 years ago. We had read stories about Israel researching the ways to design weapons that would just kill those of Arab descent, which seems pretty ridiculous, but there it is. There is a precedent for this, it seems. And on your point about this, collecting material from the Russians and the Chinese, President Putin recently addressed the Russia's Human Rights Council and said, "Do you know that biological material is being collected all over the country from different ethnic groups and people living in different geographical regions of the Russian Federation?" The question is, why is it being done? And he continues, he says, it's being done purposefully and professionally. We are kind of an object of great interest. So at least they're aware of it.
Yeah, and also in the case of China, I want to point out a number of projects on collection of biological material from Chinese people, such as saliva, cancer tissue. Why has the U.S. collecting has collected saliva and cancer tissue from Chinese people. What for? These are projects which I read over and over again, and I just couldn't figure out why. Why do they collect saliva, DNA, obviously, and cancer tissue from Chinese people? What for? These are all projects and which can be verified by documents. This is not science fiction. Maybe we sound like this, but unfortunately, all of these documents originating from the Pentagon, meaning that all this is not science fiction. This is what is happening now in Ukraine, in Georgia, in the United States, because can you imagine that in the United States, I don't know if this fact is known in the United States, but the US Army is producing, even now, live bioagents and is testing them for dissemination by aerosols and explosives. By the way, this facility has been used not only for research on bioagents, but also chemicals, probably chemical weapons. Although the US has joined the UN conventions on the prohibition of biological weapons and chemical weapons as well. And their justification is we're doing all of this for defense. But there is nothing defensive when you test bioagents or chemicals and disseminate them by aerosols or other means. This is not defense. This is an offensive military program. But this is something that the U.S. citizens must decide on whether they want to support their government or not, because this money, this is the U.S. taxpayer money, and they must decide on what programs the Pentagon must focus on, either competition with China and Russia and new nuclear weapons, or some more peaceful purposes. Because the truth is, when you spend more money in production of a development of weapons, this is not something which can bring peace to the world. And the history in our world prove that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, our country, we're in the U.S., in North Carolina. We have been watching so many developments here that have fractured our society in the past 10 years, and especially in the past year and a half, Dilyana. I mean, it's like we're waking up to another reality, and people are so distracted. They're so identified with either getting ahead or materialism or their own ideological preferences, that not to mention the fact that the media here is so controlled, and people have been people are unless you're going to websites like SOT or Southfront or a number of others, unless you're really looking for the truth, it seems quite easy for people to be manipulated into believing that things are a certain way. But there's a lot of anger here, and we expect things to boil over in the coming years, I think. So, yeah, I mean, it just speaks to what you said. Why aren't people standing up against this sort of thing? And you're absolutely right. But they've been lied to, and they're so far from knowing things. And, I think the only mainstream source of your story on the Syrian arms trafficking was Al Jazeera. These important stories they're not covered here, and we do try and cover them as best we can on SOT.
Yeah, but you run into the same problem that you ran into, Dilyana, is that even though Bulgaria is a small country and the Americans actually have quite a big amount of influence over Bulgarian politics and media, in the States there may be a lot more media, but it's just as controlled, even if it's just a matter of self-censorship, where stories like this, will never get mass media coverage, or at least it would take a miracle basically to make a story like this go viral and to have all of the mainstream media covering it. You run up against that just immediate self-censorship where whoever gets the story will either say, oh, well, that's not good publicity, or it's probably not a good idea to cover that, or it's probably not true. And then if they are interested, then their editor says, oh, no, we can't run that. So it's like you're up against a huge, a huge machine that doesn't want any information like this to get out.
And even if it does get covered by some miracle, the implications of it, the meaning of it, the significance of it, won't get explained to people. For instance, there's a reason why the Pentagon is doing research so heavily in Ukraine, in Chechnya, in Georgia, on the doorstep of Russia. It's geopolitical nemesis, and people. These are just points that seldom come to light in our controlled information space here in the U.S.
Yes, you're right, and I don't know how the situation in the United States with the media is, but I know how the situation with the media in Ukraine and in Georgia and in Bulgaria is. These are countries which are totally influenced by foreign money and foreign interests and powers. Bulgaria is a NATO member state, meaning that all our foreign policy is totally subjugated to the interests of NATO, and the same is with Georgia, the same is with Ukraine. I can't understand. I had a conversation with one Ukrainian journalist, and I can't understand why the journalists keep silent about. It is about them. I don't live in Ukraine, but I do care. I don't live in Georgia, but I do care about the Georgian people, because no matter where we live, it's not about me, about my well-being. We are all human beings, and we must do something. I know that the situation in Ukraine, in Georgia is the same, and the journalists are so afraid that something bad can happen to them. Probably in Ukraine, in Georgia, they can even be killed. I don't know. I don't have such fears in my country, but probably they fear for their lives. I don't know, but it is about them. How can they allow their government to allow foreign country to come on their territory to set up biolaboratory producing viruses, bacteria, and toxins, and testing these viruses, bacteria, and toxins on the local population, and furthermore to classify such programs and to prohibit the local government from public disclosure? This equals treason. Really, it is unimaginable. This means that you can't defend yourself in any way, and I can't understand this indifference which I meet everywhere. People think that, well, we are healthy, we are fine, we don't care. This is not true, because tomorrow it will be you, it will be your child, and your parents that can die. Because we forgot what happened in Africa, the Ebola crisis. How many people died of Ebola because it's so far away. These are people from another continent. They are less worthy of international media coverage because it is in Africa. But actually, the Pentagon had military biolaboratories at the epicenter of the Ebola crisis, and also there is one private contractor, American company, working at the Pentagon biolaboratories in Ukraine, in Georgia, which also had been awarded lucrative contracts for activities at the epicenter of the Ebola crisis, even before the outbreak of Ebola, meaning that this outbreak was somehow predicted by the Pentagon. Because why was this company sent to Sierra Leone 2 years before the outbreak to research Ebola? This is the title of the project. And the conclusion is that the Pentagon researched the Ebola virus before the epidemic. Logically, the Pentagon, if this was a natural outbreak, the Pentagon must have researched the Ebola virus during the Ebola epidemic, not before that, because otherwise they should have prevented the epidemic, not allowing the spread of this virus among the local population. There are many questions, but I feel so sorry for people in Africa. They suffer so much and nobody cares about them because they are not worthy of international media attention, because they didn't have the luck to be born in Europe or in the United States. They were born in Africa, so their life doesn't matter. And their life is like this document, military document, 29 cents per death. This is the value of their life. It's very sad, and I hope that in the end, journalists from all the countries affected will realize what this program could do to all of us, to the whole of the world, because you can't control viruses. You can genetically modify them, what the Pentagon has been doing, but you can't control and confine a virus from spreading if something goes wrong. That is why this is the subject of maybe my future investigation. The Pentagon has a lot of programs on development of vaccines. So the Pentagon genetically modifies viruses and at the same time produces vaccines. This is strange because all of this is not natural. All of this is intentional. You create a virus and then create a vaccine for this virus to protect in the future your military personnel, probably. This is the only possible explanation. Huge amount of money, really huge amount of money, millions of dollars over the years for creation of viruses, deadly viruses.
Yeah. And who knows with what we've been reading about vaccines, if the vaccines are being created to make people even more vulnerable to the viruses or to something else. But as you were speaking, Dilyana, I was reminded of something Martin Luther King Jr. had said, and I'm paraphrasing here. He said, "Injustice anywhere is a danger to people everywhere." And that I think is what you've driven home today for us here in the studio and our listeners. And I just want to thank you for spending the time with us today to go over in so much detail what it is we've been seeing and what it is you've been learning. And we really look forward to your future research and work. And it was a pleasure to speak with you today.
It's been an honor to be your guest, and thank you for the opportunity to speak up. I don't have much opportunity. I don't have many opportunities to have so much time to explain and to have such support. Thank you, and thank you to your listeners as well.
Well, thank you, Dilyana. And anytime, like the next time you write an article, we'd be glad to have you back on the show to speak for as long as you want. So thank you again for making the time for us.
Thank you too. Best of luck.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Well, that's going to bring this show to its end. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and catch us next Sunday as we bring you back some more news. And don't forget the Health and Wellness Show on Fridays at 11 a.m. Take care, everyone.